Aidan Blake's life used to hum with the smooth precision of a finely tuned engine. For 45 years, he'd coaxed life back in his sputtering motors, his hands calloused but nimble, stained with grease but capable of delicate work. He retired from Blake's Auto Shop, the business he'd built from the ground up, with a satisfied grin and a warm hand in the smaller, softer one of his wife, Martha. Their golden years were supposed to be just that, golden. Lazy mornings with hot coffee on the porch swing, evenings spent tending her rose garden, quiet conversations that spanned decades of shared history. Then the engine seized. No warning light, no sputtering cough. Just the sudden, catastrophic silence that followed Martha's unexpected heart attack. One Tuesday afternoon, the world fractured. The first few weeks were a blur of well-meaning casseroles, hushed condolences, and the suffocating scent of lilies. Aidan moved through it all like a ghost, his own body feeling hollowed out. Once the last mourner had left, and the house fell silent again, the true battle began. His workshop, a detached two-car garage at the back of his property, once his sanctuary of metal and oil, now stood cold and dark. He'd barely touched a tool since the funeral. The faint scent of motor oil, usually a comforting aroma, now felt like a bittersweet reminder of a life he no longer recognized. He was retired, yes, but retirement with Martha had been the goal. Retirement alone was just waiting. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Aidan's routine became a monotonous cycle of sleeping too much or not enough, staring blankly at the television and picking at cold meals. The porch swing, once a symbol of shared tranquility, became a lonely monument. Martha's roses, once meticulously cared for, withered in neglect, their thorns a fitting metaphor for the sharp, constant pain in his chest. His once tidy home grew dusty, mail piled up on the counter, and his reflection in the mirror showed a man he barely recognized. Gaunt, unshaven, eyes hollowed by grief that felt less like sorrow and more like a heavy, suffocating blanket. He was adrift, a ship without a rudder, a mechanic whose own internal engine had shattered. Purpose, like a forgotten tool, lay buried under layers of dust and despair. He didn't want to fix anything anymore. He couldn't even fix himself. One sweltering afternoon, a flyer, crinkled and sun-bleached, slipped under his door. It was from the local community center, advertising a new youth mentorship program. Do you have skills to share? A willingness to listen? Help shape young lives. Aidan scoffed, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it towards the overflowing trash bin. Skills? His only skill now was perfecting the art of doing nothing. Listen? He barely listened to the news anymore. Shape young lives? He couldn't even shape his own. A few days later, while shuffling through the almost empty refrigerator, Aidan heard a series of loud bangs from his backyard. Peeking through the kitchen window, he saw a group of teenagers attempting to fix a beat-up old moped parked just outside his fence line on the public easement. One scrawny kid, probably no older than 15, was aggressively kicking the tire while another, a girl with bright pink streaks in her hair, jabbed at the engine with a screwdriver as if trying to murder it. A third, slumped against a tree, looked utterly bored. A familiar pang, the ghost of an old instinct, stirred within Aidan. They were going about it all wrong. He could tell from here they'd flooded the carburetor, probably messed with the timing, and were just making it worse. But the thought of going out there, engaging, socializing, it felt like scaling a mountain. He retreated from the window, pulling the blinds shut. Not my problem, he muttered, though the slight tremor in his voice betrayed his internal conflict. The next day, the moped was still there. And the day after. And then, Friday afternoon, he saw the pink-haired girl, Maya, sitting on the curb, head in her hands. The two boys were gone. She looked frustrated, defeated. Something about her slumped shoulders, so reminiscent of his own posture lately, pricked at him. He found himself, without conscious thought, walking towards the back door. He grabbed his old toolbox, the heavy red one, its contents a familiar weight in his hands. He paused, hand on the doorknob. What are you doing, Aidan? You're going to look like a fool. But then he thought of Martha. Martha, who in her quiet way, always pushed him to be useful, to share his gifts. He opened the door. Maya looked up, startled, as Aiden shuffled towards her. Her eyes, a striking hazel, were wary, suspicious. "Can I help you, old man?" she asked, her voice laced with defiance. Aiden blinked. That moped. He gestured with his chin. "You're working on it?" "Trying to," she scoffed. "My brother and his friend gave up. Said it was a lost cause. But it's my ride to my stupid part-time job, so yeah, I'm trying." He knelt beside the moped, his eyes scanning the engine with decades of trained observation. "Looks like you flooded the carb, and that spark plug might be a goner." He rummaged in his toolbox, pulling out a spark plug wrench. "Mind if I—" Maya hesitated, then shrugged. "Whatever. Can't make it worse." Aiden worked silently, fluidly, his hands moving with the practiced ease of memory. He checked the fuel line, cleaned the carburetor, replaced the spark plug. Within 20 minutes, he stood up, wiped his hands on a greasy rag, and kicked the starter. The moped coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. Maya stared, her jaw slightly agape. "Whoa, how did you—" "Experience." Aiden grunted, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. It was the first genuine feeling he'd had in months, this flicker of satisfaction, this quiet pride in a job well done. "Thanks," Maya said, her voice softer now, less defensive. "I'm Maya, by the way." "Aiden." He nodded, then retreated, the brief interaction having drained him. The small spark of purpose, however, was enough to keep the flyer from the trash bin. He smoothed it out, reading it again. Youth Mentorship Program. He still doubted it, but Maya's surprised gratitude had resonated. A week later, still wrestling with the oppressive silence of his home, Aiden found himself walking towards the community center. His steps were heavy, his heart filled with dread. The coordinator, a cheerful woman named Brenda, clasped his hand warmly. "Aiden, so glad you came. We need people with practical skills." She led him to a small, cluttered room. 3 teenagers were already there, looking varying degrees of uncomfortable. Maya, surprisingly, was among them, though she avoided his gaze. Another boy, thin and hunched, chewed on his lip, his eyes darting around nervously. This was Liam. The third was a girl with a bright scarf and an even brighter, if somewhat forced, smile flicking through her phone. "Chloe, Aiden here is a retired mechanic," Brenda announced. "He'll be helping you with, well, whatever you need help with." She beamed, then excused herself, leaving Aiden in a room with 3 stone-faced teenagers. Silence. Heavy, awkward silence. "So," Aiden began, his voice rusty, "Brenda says you need help." Liam mumbled something indistinguishable. Chloe giggled nervously. Maya just stared at the floor. Right, Aiden sighed. "Well, I used to fix cars. Engines, transmissions, electrics. You name it." He paused. "What kind of problems are you trying to fix?" He meant in a general sense, but the question hung in the air, misinterpreted. Maya finally looked up. "I still don't get how you fix my moped so fast." "It's about understanding how things work," Aiden explained, slowly feeling a familiar comfort in the subject. "An engine is like a system. Each part has a job, and if one part isn't doing its job, the whole system breaks down. You got to figure out where the breakdown is." Liam, to Aiden's surprise, perked up slightly. "So like diagnostics?" Aiden nodded. "Exactly. You observe, you listen, you test. You don't just kick it." He shot a glance at Maya, who actually cracked a small smile. Over the next few weeks, Aiden started holding informal workshops in the community center's dusty storage room, which they slowly transformed into a makeshift repair shop. He brought in old tools, spare parts, and even an old, non-functional lawnmower for them to dismantle and reassemble. Maya, despite her initial skepticism, proved to be surprisingly adept. She had a keen eye and quick hands, though her temper flared easily when things didn't go her way. "This stupid bolt won't budge," she'd yell, ready to throw a wrench. "Frustration is part of the process, Maya," Aiden would say, his voice calm. "It's when you learn to breathe, step back, and find a different approach that you actually fix the problem. Like with people, he learned that Maya's anger often stemmed from a feeling of powerlessness at home, where her single mother worked 2 jobs and her younger siblings demanded constant attention. The moped was her only escape, her only slice of independence. Fixing it and understanding how it worked gave her a sense of control she rarely felt elsewhere. Liam, shy and introverted, blossomed under Aiden's quiet guidance. He devoured instruction manuals, asking insightful questions about electrical circuits and engine mechanics. He revealed, haltingly, that he was bullied at school for his interests in science and engineering, and that he often felt invisible. Aiden saw a younger version of himself in Liam, a boy who found solace and understanding in the logic of machines. Machines don't judge you, Liam, Aiden told him one day. They just respond to how you treat them. If you're patient and precise, they'll work for you. Liam started standing a little taller. Chloe was the trickiest. She flitted from task to task, easily distracted, more interested in chatting about social media than getting her hands dirty. Aiden suspected she was there more for the company than the mechanics. He learned she was struggling with her grades, and her parents were constantly pressuring her to be perfect. She rarely finished anything she started. "Chloe," Aiden said gently one afternoon, as she was about to abandon a half-disassembled car radio. "Every small piece plays a part. You can't just skip the hard bits and expect the whole thing to work. Life's a bit like that too, isn't it? The little efforts, the small steps, they build up to something big." He showed her how to carefully label each wire, how to painstakingly resolder a connection. He didn't push, he just kept providing opportunities for her to learn patience and perseverance. Slowly, Chloe began to focus, even completing a few small repairs herself, beaming with pride each time. As he poured himself into these young lives, Aiden found the suffocating blanket of grief beginning to lift thread by thread. The workshop, once a place of silence, now buzzed with the clinking of tools, the murmur of voices, and the occasional triumphant roar of a resurrected engine. He started shaving again, started eating regular meals. He even found himself humming old tunes as he walked to the center. The roses in Martha's garden, though still a painful reminder, no longer looked like an accusation. He began to prune them, carefully, methodically, just as he was carefully, methodically pruning away the weeds from his own life. He realized he wasn't just teaching them about mechanics. He was teaching them about problem solving, about persistence, about the value of their own hands and minds. And in turn, they were teaching him. They forced him to talk, to engage, to think beyond his own sorrow. Their youthful energy, even their frustrations, were a jolt of life. One afternoon, a local charity donated an old, rickety go-kart to the program. It was a mess, rusted frame, flat tires, and an engine that looked like it had been through a war. The challenge was to get it running for a community fun day in 2 months. The teens were thrilled, but also overwhelmed. "It's impossible," Aiden, Maya declared, throwing her hands up. "There's too much wrong with it." Liam looked at the engine diagrams with a frown, and Chloe just sighed dramatically. Aiden surveyed the go-kart. "Nothing's impossible. Just got to break it down into smaller problems. We'll strip it down to the frame, clean everything, fix what's broken, and rebuild it from the ground up." He saw the familiar glint in their eyes, fear mixed with excitement. The go-kart became their magnum opus. Aiden guided them through every step, sanding away rust, patching the frame, replacing the wheels, and most importantly, rebuilding the engine. There were frustrating days, a gear that wouldn't seat right, a screw that stripped, a wire that kept shorting. There were arguments, moments of despair. But Aiden, drawing on his deep well of patience and experience, kept them focused. One particularly tough day, the engine, after hours of work, simply wouldn't start. Maya kicked the tire in frustration, Liam slumped, and Chloe was on the verge of tears. "Stop," Aiden said, his voice firm but calm. "Everyone stop. Now, what do we do when an engine won't start?" Liam, almost automatically, murmured, "Check the spark, fuel, air." "Exactly," Aiden said, pointing to the go-kart. "It's not starting for a reason, and that reason is usually one of those 3 things. It's not personal. It's a mechanical issue. Now let's go through it, step by step, logically." They worked late that day, fueled by pizza Aiden ordered. They found a tiny crimp in the fuel line they'd missed. When Aiden finally turned the key and the little engine sputtered to life, then roared, filling the workshop with the glorious smell of gasoline and triumph. The teens erupted in cheers. High fives were exchanged. Relieved laughter filled the air. Aiden watched them, a warmth spreading through his chest, a feeling more potent than any grief. He saw not just the spark of the engine, but the spark of purpose in their eyes. In that moment, he saw Martha, too, not as a source of pain, but as a loving memory, a gentle push that had led him here. She would have loved watching these kids. She would have been proud. The community fun day arrived. Aiden stood proudly beside the go-kart, polished and gleaming, as Maya, Liam, and Chloe explained its intricacies to curious onlookers. The teens, once shy and uncertain, now exuded confidence. Maya, wearing a helmet, took the first triumphant lap around the designated track, her face alight with pure joy. Liam held court, explaining the engine's rebuild with impressive technical detail. Chloe, instead of being on her phone, eagerly helped younger kids understand how the steering worked. Aiden watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He hadn't repaired a car in years, but he had helped repair something far more complex and precious, young lives, and in doing so, his own. He wasn't over Martha's death, not entirely. The ache was still there, a dull thrum beneath the surface, but it no longer consumed him. It was now intertwined with a vibrant, messy, beautiful life he was building. His home was tidier. The porch swings saw more use, and Martha's roses, though still a tender reminder, now bloomed beautifully under his care. He even started spending a bit of time in his old workshop, not to fix cars for money, but to tinker, to create, to prepare for the next cohort of teens, or perhaps for his current men's to tackle more ambitious projects. The youth mentorship program flourished, becoming a hub where troubled hands found purpose and isolated hearts found connection. Aiden Blake, the retired mechanic who thought his engine had seized, had found a new gear. He wasn't just turning wrenches anymore. He was turning lives, including his own, towards a brighter, more purposeful future, one spark plug and one hopeful smile at a time. The quiet hum of renewed purpose had replaced the deafening silence of grief. He was no longer just Aiden. He was Mr. Blake, the mechanic who fixed more than just engines. He fixed hope. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.